Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Two Frankfort heavyweights are with us today. Later, you'll be hearing from Republican State Senator Ralph Alvarado. He's pushing for a ban on smoking and tobacco products on all school property statewide. We'll ask him about that and what the majority of Republicans plan to push when the legislature reconvenes this week. That's later, but first, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth is here. Andy Beshear is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the Commonwealth. As a Democrat, Beshear has clashed often with Republican Governor Matt Bevin. He has sued the governor over reorganizing the University of Louisville board, and the governor has accused the AG of not doing his job in enforcing abortion laws recently passed by the legislature. General Beshear has also recently formed a survivors council to advise him on ways to help victims of violent crimes. His office runs an active consumer protection division as well. Kentucky Attorney General Andy Beshear is with us, and we welcome you, sir. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
As we mentioned, we had the similar topic the last time you were here a few months ago. You and the governor have clashed publicly and often in this year since you both took office. Does the fact that you come from opposing parties set the stage for that?
Well, it shouldn't. In the end of the day, Kentuckians elected both of us, and they expect both of us to go to Frankfort and do our job. I work every day on trying to get along with everyone I can in Frankfort, because what we do is too important. And if we go to work every day focused on doing what's best for Kentucky families, which for me is prosecuting and preventing child abuse, better protecting seniors from scams and abuse, seeking justice for victims of rape and sexual assault, and finding workable solutions to our drug epidemic, we all ought to be able to work together. Those are non-political, nonpartisan things that are good for families.
When one punches, the other punches back. Do you regret that?
Well, I hate the back and forth, but I run an office that is critical for the safety and ultimately the prosperity of Kentuckians, and I've got to make sure that I do stand up for that office. And listen, I'm a guy that stands up for myself. I have deeply held beliefs and convictions about how we ought to go about helping Kentuckians, and it's my job to enforce the rule of law and the Constitution. And you know, sometimes when people violate the rule of law, they don't like being called on it, but whether they're Democrat or Republican, my job is to call them on it and to enforce that law. You
have said that you would defend one of the new abortion laws, the informed consent legislation that requires an ultrasound, but not the abortion ban at 20 weeks. How did you arrive at that decision?
One reason, the Constitution. So my job as Attorney General isn't to be the governor's lawyer or the legislature's lawyer. I'm the people's lawyer. And all the way back in 1974, Kentucky's then highest court said, and last year in Beshear v. Bevin, the Supreme Court said that the Attorney General's first and foremost duty is to protect the Constitution. And that's to protect it from both executive overreach as well as unconstitutional legislation. So what we did is we sat down without any personal beliefs, without looking at our religious beliefs, and just looked at the law. House Bill 2, the ultrasound bill, there is a split in the circuits as to whether it's constitutional. So we are defending that. We're defending two parties in that lawsuit, and we're defending it aggressively. We've actually moved to have the suit dismissed against those parties. When you move over to the ban, the 20-week ban, the problem is there are over 5 Supreme Court cases that say you can't set a prohibition based on a number of weeks. There's at least 5 of them, U.S. Supreme Court. So once you get down to the federal circuits, all 3 that have reviewed it have said it's not only unconstitutional, it's not a close call. In fact, Bill, the 10th Circuit, where the new U.S. Supreme Court nominee comes from, said that type of ban is so unconstitutional that when a state legislature passes it, they are intentionally and directly violating the Constitution, and that they ought to know better. But you don't have to take my word for what my duty is with the Constitution. Take Senator Jeff Sessions, who is Donald Trump's nominee for the U.S. Attorney General. What's he testified? That even an appointed U.S. Attorney General has a duty to the Constitution, and that's why he's testified that he'll not only enforce but support Roe v. Wade, because it's the law of the land, as well as the same-sex marriage law.
So you disagree with those who believe that the Attorney General should defend all laws passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor?
It's not me. It's what the Kentucky Supreme Court has said is my constitutional duty. They say that my one oath that I take when I come into office is to protect the Constitution, and that makes it my job. And they ruled this all the way back in 1974. It's been the law of the land for 43 years. That I have to protect that Constitution.
You have challenged the governor on higher education. You sued him for reorganizing the University of Louisville board, which he says was dysfunctional and out of balance with the law. Does the governor have a right to appoint the leadership that he chooses for those state universities?
He has a right to appoint them under the process set out in statute. And just as importantly, he needs to appoint them in a way that maintains the accreditation of the university. So what Governor Bevin did was, solely on his own initiative, totally dissolved the governing board for a major university, the University of Louisville, overnight, and put entirely new people on it, despite the fact that there was a statute that said these people serve for a set term of years and could only be removed for cause. Because that was an illegal order, I sued him in Franklin Circuit Court, and that court said, you're right, the governor's actions were illegal. Meanwhile, the accreditation agency for the university, that's the national group that determines if they meet certain standards, which you have to meet to get federal financial aid for students, or to play NCAA basketball or football, or to get research grants, looked at this issue and said the governor's actions created so much undue political influence and violated their standard, which requires a fair process for removing trustees, that they put the very accreditation of the university on probation. That is a big sanction, the biggest sanction before they remove accreditation.
When you are looking at these issues and how to proceed, are you looking at the immediate situation in front of you, or are you looking long-term at how policy is going to be carried out?
Well, for me, it's not the policy. There have been some policies even in that first week of this last session that I disagree with. I think that right to work law is going to mean that Kentucky families, hardworking Kentucky families, earn less. I think we've proven in the past that that doesn't generate jobs. We won that Governor's Cup for best state for economic development 2 straight years before the law passed. But you don't see me challenging it in court. That's because all of our decisions that we make on the lawsuits that we bring are solely based on the law and not our view on what good or bad policies are. I'll give you one other example. Connect was pretty important to me. That was I think the best exchange created in the country, and my dad created it. And a number of people who really needed health care got it through Connect. Governor Bevin dismantled Connect. I've said I think that's a bad idea, that it's bad policy, and that people are hurt by it, but you haven't seen me sue over it. Why? Because all of our decisions we make based solely on the law, and any lawsuit I bring is because I believe deep in my core that actions have violated the law or the Constitution.
The Attorney General of the Commonwealth is Andy Beshear. He's with us on Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll be back with him in a moment, and Senator Ralph Alvarado joins us a little later right here. Welcome back. It's Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT, and we're joined by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, who is continuing with us. This week, you announced a survivals council, as you call it. That is to advise you. What are they supposed to do?
These are 26 survivors of violent crime that's either occurred to them or to their families. We have folks who have lost sons and daughters to violent crime. We have survivors of rape and sexual assault. We have parents of children who've been abused by caretakers. Their role is to make sure that we are always victim-centered, that my office never forgets that the most important person in a crime isn't the perpetrator. I mean, we're going to catch them, we're going to put them in jail, but is the victim who needs our help, and they drive us. That's why we do what we do. So they're going to make sure that our investigations are victim-centered, our prosecutions are victim-centered, our victims advocacy groups are up to par. And then we're going to take those best practices that they've helped us develop and push them out all over the state. they're also going to comment on legislation that's out there to make sure that we put into law the very best statutes that we can to make sure that we serve them.
Oftentimes crime victims are hurting. They don't know how the system works. Is this designed to give them some better guidance?
Absolutely. What we find is that unfortunately folks that are scarred through violent crime often suffer more and additional trauma as they go through the criminal justice system. We got to recognize that. For a victim of crime, the criminal justice system ought to be a positive experience about seeking justice. And you can talk to some survivors who went through that process, had someone that pushed, had the prosecution, and it may not have even turned out the way that they had hoped, but they still found justice in that. And we've got to make sure that we're always seeking justice for those victims.
Governor Bevin this week removed the box that you check to say that you've been convicted of a crime in Kentucky if you're an applicant for state employment. Do you support that?
I think it's a good start. I think that we absolutely have to find a means to get folks, especially who have a drug conviction and have gone through treatment and are putting their life back together. We got to make sure they can get a job out there. And we need our businesses out there to make sure that they're hiring these folks, because in the end, that's how we are going to face this drug epidemic, through treatment and rebuilding of lives. And it can spark intra-generational change, because folks who have been through treatment and rebuild their families, their kids are less likely to use, and their kids' kids are less likely to use.
Your consumer protection division is always very busy, lots going on, always scams out there of one sort or another, and at times you recover some money on behalf of the state. You have a couple of those. Western Union,
yes,
you're getting money back from them just because they were sort of the means for some of the scams.
For many years, scam artists would use Western Union to have people wire them money, whether it was the IRS scam, the deputy sheriff scam. These folks would get you scared and say, okay, you have to wire $15,000 through Western Union or we're going to come get you. The sheriff's going to come arrest you. We recovered $6.8 million that's going to go back to Kentucky consumers, and we're really happy about that. But there are always more scam artists out there. That's why we're on the road every day, especially dealing with seniors, and we launched Scam Alerts, the state's first direct text, direct email scam warning system. A
couple of automakers have also heard from you and have paid up.
That's right. We had a huge settlement against Volkswagen, which is going to mean more than $100 million to Kentucky and Kentuckians, and Hyundai Kia, which overstated their miles per gallon. We recovered over $700,000 with a couple $100,000 going to the general fund.
You put out a news release here with Valentine's Day approaching that there are what you have called sweetheart scams going on. What is that?
Those are people who create fake profiles, and during a period of the year where some of us may be feeling lonely, try to take advantage of you, try to act like they are interested, and then they start asking for money, for presents, and for other things. So I'd urge everybody out there, just be cautious. There are scammers online. Make sure that at any time, if you have concerns, anytime they ask you for money, that you immediately shut it down.
A few seconds left. You mentioned your father. He was in Washington. He's staying busy. Your mother, the former First Lady, they're doing okay?
They are both staying busy. What I need from them, though, is more babysitting. Two great kids, 7, 6, and we need them more at their grandparents a little bit more.
Attorney General Andy Beshear, thanks for coming. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Back in a moment on Kentucky Newsmakers with State Senator Ralph Alvarado proposing a statewide school smoking ban. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers, and it's so good to have you with us on WKYT. State Senator Ralph Alvarado is busy as a doctor and serving the 28th District in the Kentucky Senate. That includes Clark and Montgomery counties and a part of Fayette County. Senator Alvarado got national attention last summer when he addressed the Republican National Convention. With the legislature in session now, he's proposing a ban on smoking and tobacco products on school property statewide. Senator, Dr. Alvarado, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you coming in very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're pushing for this school smoking ban while saying that you really wanted a wider workplace smoking ban to be put in. Will Kentucky lawmakers not go that step at this point, even though most of our surrounding states have?
Yeah, I think that's probably a proper assessment. I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, and there's a lot of debate. And again, it's more of a rural-urban debate, I would say, at this point amongst a lot of the legislators. So I've talked to every one of them at length about a smoke-free Kentucky proposal. A lot of them are concerned about individual liberties of businesses, and I understand their positions. And I respect those because I understand where they're coming from. For me, I view tobacco, especially combustible tobacco, as a legal poison, is how I view it. And so it causes it's a known carcinogen, causes, cancers, colon cancers, lung cancers, bladder cancers, heart disease. And it's right now at this point, really from people personally using tobacco, almost 8,900 deaths in the state every year, and the cost of that is enormous for our state budget. So we tried to get that done in the past. There hasn't been as much support. I have to get a certain number of members of the Senate to be able to agree to bring that to the floor for a vote. I can't get to that threshold, and I've tried every angle that I know of how. So, but all of them in their opposition did agree that public spaces, such as government buildings and schools, are areas where we should have some restrictions on tobacco use, and that's where this bill has come forth.
A recent survey indicates about 1 in 6 high school students acknowledge they smoke. So then you're saying that you see the long-term effects of that in your practice?
Well, sure, absolutely. I mean, in my practice, people that smoke, obviously emphysema, all the cancers I just mentioned, heart disease, peripheral vascular disease, chronic bronchitis, all of those things bring an enormous cost. I think the overall cost of tobacco use in Kentucky is about $1.9 billion annually, and for Medicaid alone, it's almost $590 million. So enormous costs. It's something that we've got to do just from a cost perspective to bring that down, but also from the health of our population. If we have an unhealthy population with a lot of medical problems, employers who want to bring jobs to the state are going to look at that, and it's a higher cost for them, and they're not as willing to invest in a state where we have that. Other states that have passed smoking bans for school campuses or restricted that severely have seen major drops in their youth smoking rates. And right now, Kentucky's youth smoking rate is 16.9%. The national adult smoking rate is 15.1%. So our kids smoke at a heavier rate than adults do on a national level.
What would your proposal do?
Basically, it's going to require that all school districts, basically across the entire Commonwealth, will have to go smoke-free and tobacco-free for that matter. So that'll include e-cigarettes, any form of tobacco that's out there. The schools will have to put up no smoking signs to let people know that they're not allowed to smoke or use tobacco products on campus. But it also gives every school board the authority to set up their own policy and then to enforce those policies. We've negotiated with them a little bit. They want a lot more local control, and I respect that local control. They want to be able to set up that policy themselves. And they've got some examples. About a little over 70 of our school districts right now already have these policies in place. And where they've implemented them, it's gone very smoothly. And we're hoping in a generation or so to see a major drop in adult smoking rates as a result of this.
What do you think the chances are of this passing?
I think it's good. I've talked to, it's been assigned to Education Committee. I've talked to Chairman Wilson. He wanted to make sure there were certain groups that were okay with it. I've talked to those groups. I think we've got a bill now that they're going to be at least not opposed to at this point. And I think the odds are pretty good. Like I said, even the opponents to a smoke-free Kentucky agree that public spaces should be a place where we should be protecting our kids. And I feel very good about the odds.
Senator, it was a very fast start to the legislative session when they were in for that 1 week, when normally that is used for organizational purposes, and then you take the break and you come back and you do some things.
Right.
But there was a lot passed then, of course, including right-to-work legislation and the abortion restrictions that were passed. Do you see that first week as having been extraordinarily productive?
Yeah, I think if we ended session right now, I think what we did that first week, I think would be a success in and of itself, especially in a short session. I think there's more coming. There's going to be a lot of reforms, I think, for anything from our schools, pension reforms, I think transparency within government. We'll see more of that coming down the pike. I think we're going to try to make government more efficient. This time we've been talking about things of trying to align our gubernatorial elections with our presidential elections. That'll save the state money, enhance voter turnout, excuse me, and hoping to get things like medical review panels and medical tort reform done as well. So there's still a lot to come. I think you're going to see more of the same high pace in the next 25 days.
Can it be as fast for the rest of the session as it has been in the first week?
Oh, it can be. We're Republicans and we're in control. I think you can see us working very hard and very fast.
You support these medical review panels. What do they do?
Basically, it allows that right now our nursing homes are getting crushed. A lot of our medical practitioners are practicing defensive medicine because of the legal climate in the state. We have absolutely no tort reform. I think we're one of 7 states left with nothing at all. And so what we're trying to get done is that if a person feels they've been harmed by a provider, whether it be a nursing home or a doctor, that a panel will get established. It's overseen by an attorney. They produce a bunch of practitioners that they have to choose from. The plaintiff picks let's say if you're suing a doctor, the plaintiff picks a doctor. The defendant will then pick a doctor from that group that the chairman of the panel has put together. Those 2 doctors pick a 3rd doctor and they review the case. If the case has merit, then that's discoverable, it's admissible in court. If it has merit, typically the defendant or the doctor will typically settle the case so that the plaintiff gets an award much more quickly and doesn't have to go through a 3, 4, 5-year process in court to get that money and pay their attorney most of it. If they find in favor of the doctor saying they didn't do anything wrong, you can still go through the whole court proceedings, but that's admissible in court and a jury gets to hear that, and the odds of winning are going to be very low. Where this has been done in Indiana, they've seen major reductions in these lawsuits, and about 20% of the time the plaintiff is found to have been harmed in the situation. 80% of the time they find for the defendants. But I think it really uncorks a lot of plaintiffs getting their awards quicker, and it makes it sometimes it kind of makes it easier to be able to go through the legal process. You don't have the courts bogged down with a lot of cases.
Your position would be then, if the suit has merit, it would go forward.
It can. I mean, but typically what you're going to find is if it has merit and if somebody's been wronged, the doctors are typically, or the nursing home or whoever has been found to have been at fault, will typically pay much quickly. They don't want to have to go through a whole court proceeding because they're probably going to wind up losing.
Do you believe that the legislature will authorize charter schools, and is it important how that is done?
Yeah, I think it is. The answer to both of those is yes. I believe it's going to be coming from the House more than likely this year, is my understanding. Still, what that bill is going to look like, there's still some discussions and negotiations on that. Some are pushing for pilot programs to determine how they will work well in Jefferson County and Fayette County in particular. Others are asking more for a statewide effect on charter schools. So I don't think there's been a determined factor of the language of what we're going to see yet, but I think we're going to see something moving forward this session.
A lot of people say it's important who originates those charters, whether it is overseen by the local school districts or the Kentucky Department of Education. Is that the kind of thing that's going to have to be worked out in the bill?
Yeah, and I think both chairmen also of education right now are going to have some say in how that gets done. So I think there's some discussions on that, but what we've proposed in the past have been pilot programs. We know that a lot of our inner city schools, the ones that are having the most struggles, and we want to give more opportunities for parents of kids in portions of Jefferson County and Fayette County who are asking for this to be done. So I know that a lot of our, talking to a lot of members in our African American community, they're the ones who are asking for charter schools and those options to be implemented. So we're hoping at least to provide some of those options, at least in some of our most populous counties.
Kentucky's public colleges and universities have seen the state commitment to higher education shrink for nearly a straight decade at this point. Do you see that commitment turning around at some point?
Well, I hope so. I mean, the hard part we have right now, I think, is that a lot of folks, we get asked for money for lots of different projects, whether it be for our schools, for cost of living increases for our employees in the state. The difficult part is that we've got a $35 billion unfunded pension liability that hangs over us like an albatross that's really affecting so much of what we're trying to do. We know that Governor Bevin, in last year's address to the Commonwealth, said that that's going to be the main focus of trying to find a way to help, fill up that hole that we've created as a state. Once we get that done, I think we'll be able to do a lot of the fun things, either expand funding for our schools or higher education, cost of living increases for employees, all the things that we want to see government do, and the things that, frankly, I think legislators enjoy doing because we get a lot of pats on the back for doing those kinds of fun things. But while we've got this massive unfunded liability, we've got to address that issue, and we have to make some tough choices. And so that's typically the thing. I think it will turn around in the future. It just depends on how quickly we can fill up that hole.
Pension and tax reform are seen as very complex issues that it is going to be extremely difficult to deal with in a regular session of the legislature. There's talk of a special session. There has been talk that we've become aware of possibly cutting some days off of this session and saving those for a session that could be dedicated to those issues. Do you see that as likely coming later in the year?
The tax reform or the
special session?
Well, I think so. The governor's been saying that throughout the year. I know when he came and spoke in Clark County, gave a speech last spring. He said we're going to be addressing tax reform this year. It will be a year-long fight to kind of determine how that's going to look. It's very complicated. Most General Assemblies in the past have avoided this because they know how tough it's going to be. But I think there's been a general consensus that we'd like to see decreases in corporate taxes, perhaps decreases in income taxes. We might see increases in consumption-based taxes to make us competitive with Tennessee, Florida, Texas, where unfortunately a lot of our folks here in Kentucky, when they make their fortunes, they leave our state and take those money somewhere else. We want to create an environment where they can stay and reinvest those dollars here.
Some say they would favor tax reform if it's revenue neutral. Does that meet with the state's interest, though, in getting some revenue?
Yeah, that's going to be the year-long discussion. That's why it's a special session. If it was that easy, it would be handled in a matter of weeks. But it's going to take that'll be a huge fight, and there'll be a discussion of, do we remove tax credits? Do we add tax credits? That's a big fight. There's going to be issues of what, if you're going to have a consumption-based tax, what do you tax? Do we change who can tax? All those kinds of things.
Senator, in your district, you represent Clark, Montgomery, and again, a large part of Fayette County. What are a couple of projects that you're interested in?
Well, I mean, road projects, obviously there's some important road projects we're trying to get accomplished. Liberty Road, we know the congestion. If anybody drives that road in the morning, they know the congestion that there is there. We're trying to get that widened and get the funds, and hopefully the governor's office right now has a very tough job, but they've got about $1 billion worth of projects and about $100 million to spend for those. You have to prioritize them. I'm trying to convince the cabinet that that's a very important project. We also have an extension of Citation Road we're trying to get accomplished into Deep Springs and the kind of the northeastern part of Fayette County to open some of the congestion there up. There's a bypass extension in Clark County that would really help with economic development. And in Montgomery County, the western part of 60, there's a very windy road, a lot of deaths there every year. We're trying to get that straightened out. So some very important projects in my turf. I'm trying to advocate for all of those.
And you have an interesting district, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Very mixed.
Urban, rural.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a good mix. I get a lot of opinions from a lot of people.
Senator Ralph Alvarado, thanks for coming. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. I'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning, and we hope you make it a good week ahead.